Hello students! Tonight we will begin our study of the cell cycle. In this section, we will explore the complex steps a cell must go through in order to make new cells. However, before we get into the details of how a cell divides to make more cells, we should first take a moment to focus on why cells divide in the first place. So, there are three very important reasons that cells divide. The first is that cell division increases the number of cells in our bodies, which is how organisms grow. For example, look at the mother cheetah and her cub. At present, her cub is small, but we all know that over a few years, the cub will increase in size until it is as large as its mother. The way it is able to increase its size is by adding more cells through cell division. The second reason the cell cycle is important to organisms is that it allows us to replace damaged and worn out cells. Imagine you are the girl in the picture here with the scraped knee. We have all injured ourselves like this and in many other ways. Now, you've probably taken it for granted that when you get a scrape, it will heal. But let's think about what that means for a second. When you injure yourself, what you've done is you've damaged and killed the cells in the area of the injury. In order for you to heal, you must replace the cells that were damaged. Otherwise, you'd spend the rest of your life with an open wound. Fortunately, because of cell division, you are able to make new cells to replace the damaged ones. The final reason that cell division is important is that some organisms use it to reproduce themselves. Now, typically, the types of organisms that use cell division to reproduce themselves are organisms like the bacteria shown in the photo on the bottom right. We will discuss this simple method of reproduction more when we get to Chapter 4. All right, now let's move on to describing exactly how a cell goes about making more copies of itself. We will begin by describing the parts of the cell's life cycle. Just as organisms have a life cycle, for instance, yours, which has the phases of birth, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and death, individual cells also have a life cycle. We call the life cycle of the cell the cell cycle. So I'm going to write that here. It's shown in the picture here. This whole thing is a representation of the cell's life cycle, which is called the cell cycle. All right. By looking at the diagram, you should be able to see that the cell cycle is divided into two major phases. The first is called interphase. And that's what you see here beginning the cell cycle, this entire first part is interphase. This makes up the majority of the cell's lifetime. The second phase is mitotic phase, or M phase for short. Mitotic phase represents this part of the cell cycle, the end of the cell cycle, and while it is shorter, much shorter than interphase, it is very significant in completing the process of cell division. Okay, you will see if you look at this picture that both interphase and M phase are divided into are further divided into smaller parts. Interphase is divided into G1, S, and G2. And then mitotic phase is divided into the parts mitosis and cytokinesis. And we will address those in more detail on the upcoming slides. Finally, it's important to note that the amount of time it takes to complete the cell cycle varies, depending on which type of cell we're looking at. Cells such as those that make up embryos or that are found in areas such as the digestive system or skin go through the cell cycle very quickly, sometimes as short as a few minutes or an hour or a few hours. Other types of cells, like those in your liver or your lungs, can take years to complete a cell cycle. And then finally, there are some cells, like your neurons, that do not complete the cell cycle at all. They stay in interphase throughout their life. So let's dive into the details of the cell cycle by starting at the beginning with interphase. As we saw in the previous diagram, cells spend the majority of their cell lifetime in interphase. During interphase, the cell grows, develops, and completes its normal daily activities, such as making proteins, generating ATP, and so on. This is what it will do for most of its cell life. However, if a cell is getting ready to divide, it will use the remaining time in interphase to do something to prepare it so that it is ready to go into M phase. And that is that it will replicate its organelles and its DNA. So let's take a second to think about why it is important for a cell to duplicate its hereditary material before it divides. The reason that it is important is that both of the new cells that will be produced from mitosis and cell division will need to get their own full copy of instructions, or else they would not be able to function normally. So, in order to be prepared to give both new cells what they need, we need to copy all of our DNA and our organelles before we start trying to divide up the cell. If the cell is going to divide, then after it is done interphase, it will move into M phase. M phase, as we saw before, is much shorter than interphase. But nonetheless, it contains the important and complex steps that are needed to make new cells. M phase is divided into two parts. The first is mitosis. Mitosis is the division of a cell nucleus into two new identical nuclei. Mitosis is further divided into 4 stages. The name of these stages are prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. You can see pictures in sequential order here. This one here is going to be prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. People tend to remember the acronym PMAT to remember the order of the phases of mitosis. We will describe what occurs in each of these phases in more detail tomorrow. The second part of M phase, brain pop. The second part of M phase is cell division. This is better known as cytokinesis, and I'll expect you guys to use this term cytokinesis. This is the division of the cytoplasm which finishes the formation of the 2 new cells. This occurs after mitosis. These ones here show the division of the cytoplasm into 2 new cells. It's basically taking this cell that's in telophase and finishing the division there to make 2 new cells. All right. We are done for tonight. Don't forget about your Quizmodo, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.